Have you ever seen the Netflix show House of Cards? It follows a politician who specializes in dirty backroom wheeling and dealing. In fact, a group of them. It gets a bit crazy, but one of the ongoing themes is just how corrupt the government is in Washington because of the dishonest people in charge. And frankly, the January 6th committee's so-called emergency hearing yesterday remind me of exactly that, because as we've said before, it's all theater. But more importantly than that, it showed us that the whole government is built on a house of cards at this moment in time. And the same goes for the Never Trump movement, which is really one and the same with Biden's government at this point. Every network yesterday was breathlessly covering former low-level aide to Mark Meadows, Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony to the committee, hanging on every word as if it were gospel, instead of standard hearsay, which, of course, it all was. The 25-year-old, who was 24 at the time of Trump's presidency, was painted as an important insider within the Trump circle. And that should have been our first red flag for sure, because quite clearly she wasn't. But then, here came her testimony, and she said stuff like this, explaining what White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations Tony Ornato allegedly told her about the president on January the 6th. Now, I'm going to play this clip for you, without cuts, without edits, so you know we didn't leave anything out. You need to hear this. Here it is.
Tony proceeded to tell me that when the president got in the Beast, he was under the impression from Mr. Meadows that the off-the-record movement to the Capitol was still possible and likely to happen, but that Bobby had more information. So once the president had gotten into the vehicle with Bobby, he thought that they were going up to the Capitol, and when Bobby had relayed to him, we're not, we don't have the assets to do it, it's not secure, we're going back to the West Wing. The president had very strong, a very angry response to that. Tony described him as being irate. The president said something to the effect of, "I'm the effing president, take me up to the Capitol now." To which Bobby responded, "Sir, we have to go back to the West Wing." The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel. Mr. Engel grabbed his arm, said, "Sir, you need to take your hand off the steering wheel. We're going back to the West Wing. We're not going to the Capitol." Mr. Trump then used his free hand to lunge towards Bobby Engel. And when Mr. Ornato had recounted this story to me, he had motioned towards his clavicles.
Okay, so there is a whole host of problems with that statement. Number one, the president didn't get into the Beast, which is the president's heavily armored limousine. No, he got into a Suburban that day. And today, Tony Ornato is among several people saying Hutchinson's testimony is flat out false. She's lying. In fact, this was shown during Ms. Hutchinson's testimony by the January 6th committee. You're seeing the footage they played right now. So, okay, that could have been an honest mistake, certainly, especially because if the president was riding in the Beast, it would be physically impossible for him to try and choke out a Secret Service agent sitting in the front because the cab is sealed and separated from where the driver and front seats are. And the president getting mad because the Secret Service wouldn't let him go where he wanted to go, well, that does seem plausible, certainly. I'd say something akin to, "I'm the effing president as well." Honestly, okay. But lunging at an agent, trying to choke them out? Come on. And it seems Liz Cheney worked overtime to head off any notion that could have been a lie when she asked this. Listen.
Did Mr. Engel correct or disagree with any part of the story from Mr. Ornato?
Mr. Engel did not correct or disagree with any part of the story.
Did Mr. Engel or Mr. Ornato ever after that tell you that what Mr. Ornato had just said was untrue?
Neither Mr. Ornato nor Mr. Engel told me ever that it was untrue.
Now, bear in mind, this is all hearsay. She didn't see or hear any of these things firsthand. Remember that. We're going to come back to that in a moment. But first, let's get to how the media reported this. Here's CBS and Norah O'Donnell speaking solemnly about if this testimony would lead to the president being indicted. It's so serious. Listen.
There was a lot that made today different.
There was. We've seen the outside picture on January 6th. What this was today was the inside intimate portrait, the closest look we've gotten to President Trump on that day and his inner circle. And we were given that view by someone who had a unique perch. Hutchinson worked for the chief of staff. That is like being in the air traffic control tower of a White House. So she witnessed the frantic lawyers running through the hall, the pleas from the members of Congress, and her boss, who wilted in the face of a president who was encouraging violence, ignoring the warnings, and even lunging at his Secret Service agent, would stop at nothing until the violence started, and then did nothing for so long.
We are at a historic crossroads. All eyes turn to Attorney General Merrick Garland as he look and evaluate this new evidence and believe that it rises to the threshold of indicting a former president of the United States. A weighty decision for the former judge carries enormous political and legal implications.
Well, there's enormous implications about how dishonest the reporting is there. Again, this is hearsay evidence. It would never be admitted in any court of law in America. Period. Could someone please say the walls are closing in again just for me? And it was pretty much the same tone on all the major networks, including Fox News, which honestly is one of the reasons you should watch this program and this network. They're all wetting themselves over the possibility of a 25-year-old aide's testimony leading to the indictment of a former president. And trust me, they were excited for that possibility. They were fired up. So send in the clowns. How about notorious network news liar and pretend journalist? Not that there's really a difference anymore. Here's Dan Rather. He tweeted this: the biggest scandal in American political history, and that's saying a lot. Jaw-dropping, sickening, infuriating. And he also wrote this, just noting that crime families are often brought down by someone they overlooked. The histrionics are really quite something, and in this case, embarrassing for Dan Rather. You ever notice how the left and the press treat everything like they're in a movie? This is the latest stunning plot twist in pursuit of the villain. The villain, of course, is always Donald Trump. It's weird and also a sign that they're completely unaware of reality, clearly. As it turns out, they couldn't separate reality from fiction. What a shock. Because the two men Ms. Hutchinson referred to there and was talking about, Tony Ornato and Robert Engel, came out shortly after the breathless broadcast from CBS and apparently said that none of that story about the president was true. The tweet from CNN read this way: a Secret Service official familiar with the matter told CNN that Tony Ornato denies telling Cassidy Hutchinson that the former president grabbed the steering wheel or an agent on his detail. And then NBC News reporter Peter Alexander came out with this: a source close to the Secret Service tells me both Bobby Engel and the lead agent and the presidential limousine SUV driver are prepared to testify under oath that neither man was assaulted and that Mr. Trump never lunged for the steering wheel. I wonder if this J6 committee will call them to testify. What do you think? Will they have an emergency hearing for that too? Another thing that's weird is this. Apparently, the committee had testimony already on tape from Ornato and Engel. It would have been easy to corroborate Hutchinson's story if it were true, if they chose to, but of course, they didn't because they couldn't. So did Liz Cheney know what was being said wasn't true? Remember, she did ask Hutchinson specifically if Ornato or Engel ever denied the story. So once that all started melting down and the networks were caught correcting the story, tweets like this one from Never Trumper David French began to fly. Didn't age well. French saying Hutchinson's bravery is putting the GOP's cowardice to shame. There were a lot of tweets from Never Trumpers about her bravery that aged just about as well, as you can imagine. So they decided to come out and come at it from a different angle. Mr. French tweeted this out after Hutchinson's story completely fell apart by last night. As a legal matter, if you're focusing on the contested allegation of lunging and choking, you're focusing on the wrong thing. There was different evidence that matters far more, and it's directly relevant to a potential prosecution. Okay. That all might have been bogus, but that's not even important. So don't worry about that. I mean, it's not like they called an emergency session of the committee or anything, except they did. He also attacked the link to a story he wrote titled "The Case for Prosecuting Donald Trump Just Got Much Stronger," despite just basically admitting that Hutchinson's testimony was not based in reality. David French isn't based in reality. In it, he calls Hutchinson's testimony the most extraordinary congressional testimony he's ever seen. And he argues that this exchange is actually what could cause criminal prosecution to be brought against Donald Trump. Listen.
I was part of a conversation. I was in the vicinity of a conversation where I overheard the president say something to the effect of, I don't effing care that they have weapons. They're not here to hurt me. Take the effing mags away. Let my people in. They can march to the Capitol from here. Let the people in. Take the effing mags away.
Just to be clear, Ms. Hutchinson, is it your understanding that the president wanted to take the mags away and said that the armed individuals were not there to hurt him?
That's a fair assessment.
The issue wasn't with the amount of space available in the official rally area only, but instead that people did not want to have to go through the mags.
By the way, when they say mags, they're talking about magnometers, devices that'll detect if someone might be carrying a weapon. Hutchinson says that Trump didn't want them around, inferring that he wanted the crowd to be armed. And she even states that she heard President Trump say he didn't care if they had weapons. French argues that Trump summoned the mob to Washington, knew that it would get violent, also knew that the crowd had weapons and did not care and wanted them to storm the Capitol building. Oh, by the way, Capitol police officers helpfully opened many of those doors for those rioters, as they're called. We know that based on all the video that's out there. French says that because the president apparently knew all of this and told them to fight like hell, that meant he was leading an insurrection. You just have to ignore the fact that Trump also called for 10,000 National Guard troops to be placed at the Capitol prior to January 6th, but it was ignored by Nancy Pelosi and company. Oh, and that story about Trump looking to commandeer his vehicle and drive to the Capitol, what French and the J6 committee is inferring is that Trump wanted to personally lead the rioters, possibly into the Capitol himself, and take over the government. Now, let me ask you this. How plausible do you think that really is? Especially given now that it looks like Cassidy Hutchinson lied under oath. And at the very least, got her story so wrong, it's indefensible. At least according to everyone she claims to have heard these stories from. They say she's got it wrong, and they're willing to testify. Also, if all of these J6 rioters were apparently armed and ready to use their weapons, why was nobody shot except one person? One person, Trump supporter Ashley Babbitt. She was shot and killed that day. Nobody wants to speak her name at the J6 committee hearings, do they? Now, this could all be a storyline on House of Cards, with Liz Cheney starring in the main role instead of Kevin Spacey. The J6 committee is trying everything it can to present the one-sided narrative, not the actual truth. And yesterday made it perfectly clear that what was happening is exactly what they wanted you to see. It also made perfectly clear that the leftist media and the never-Trumpers are perfectly fine going along with these lies and rooting for President Trump to be indicted, whether it's true or not. It's clear the deep state does not want President Trump to occupy the Oval Office ever again. That is true. And that should make you ask, why is that? Why do they fear him so much that they'll put on a show like this and call in all the clowns? You see, the government is built on a house of cards, and they're doing everything in their power to make it fall down right now, at least fall down enough to prevent Donald Trump access. And there was something about President Trump throwing his lunch put in there, too. And so we have somehow gone from what did the president know, and when did he know it, to when did the president throw his sandwich and where did he throw it? Did he hit anybody? In the meantime, speaking of cards, we're still stuck with Joe Biden. And you have to wonder if he's playing with a full deck of cards at all. Something to consider.